Bottom edge, there's a lot of buyers coming in. So what the commercials or the market makers will try and do is they'll have a look at this and they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to try and get you guys to sell. And that's what they're doing here. See the orange line dropping? They're trying to get these buyers to sell into the bottom edge. And by running stops, perhaps so this is what we call manipulation. This is direct manipulation to get sellers to come in. Now, what a lot of the times happens is that the blue line doesn't drop by much, but it still drops. Okay, sometimes you get this big drop, but obviously, if everybody knows it's still bullish, you don't get that big a drop. You get a drop, and a lot of times what happens is when that drops, you see the orange line actually flipping at that stage there. That's a manipulation to buy into a bottom edge, guys. That's a manipulation to buy into a bottom edge. Now, sometimes there isn't any manipulation. It just happens kind of organically. You know, you say, well, what was the point of it? Because you don't know it's going to happen organically, do you? So sometimes what happens is that the market just sits here. Maybe we get something like that, and then it goes. And if I draw the orange line, so when that happens organically, we don't have any discussion to have, do we? You understand that? We don't have any discussion to have, because when this is happening here on the left-hand chart, the question is why? You know, there's always this question about why are they doing what they're doing here? Are they bearish or bullish? Now, why would we say that? Why would they say that? Because obviously they're obviously trying to stop the buying. Is that because they're net selling? Because obviously one of the things that we can all agree with is, based on the previous classrooms, is that's absorption, yes? So if that's absorption, is it because they're net bearish, or is it because they're capping? So we don't actually have an answer to that question unless we refer to value. We can't answer that question, but all we can do is observe that it's happening, right? That's all we can do. Observe that it's happening. We can't answer the question. We need more information on this one. So that obviously leaves us with the idea that we still need to do an interpretation of what's going on. Well, we don't need to do an interpretation on example number 2, do we? There are no manipulations required. There's nothing happening. It's just that they've pulled away a little liquidity just to try and see if anybody falls out of bed here. We know that they're not selling. We know that there's no reason for it. We know there's nobody getting a good price. And therefore, just simply, sometimes that happens. And we call this the fresh air trade. This is always going to be bullish. This is always going to be bullish. So this is a fresh air buy. And why do we call it fresh air? Because there's nothing in it. It's just fresh air. It's just a whole bag of hot air, simply circulating around the price to see if anybody falls out. There's no real reason for it. It's just price discovery. And on the basis that it's just price discovery to see if any stops fall out, there's no reason for it. There's not an intention to sell it. There's no discussion about what the absorption is. It's just simply the way the trade works. So we buy it. We buy into that fresh air. We don't just buy it randomly. We buy it if we've got a reason that we want to be buying the product in the first place. But it's a very good trade. And obviously what happens on that very good trade is, you can see that on this example here, can we all agree that the S&P was fresh air, yes or no? Now that we know what fresh air is, it's when the divergence in price is divergent from the orange and the blue line. Can we all agree that the bottom edge is fresh air? So that makes life at the bottom edge a lot easier, because we know there's no sellers. They're just doing manipulation to try and get a little bit of liquidity, but it's just price discovery. And then at the top edge, you can see, of course, that there's almost a kind of fresh air feel about that last candle, because the orange line starts going down, doesn't it? On that last candle, the orange line actually starts reducing into that area. So we always ask and we always look and we always try and find these areas. So can we all agree that on gold, that fresh air trade was actually very good on gold? Can we agree there was a kind of fresh air trade here as well? The orange line's divergent, the blue line's divergent, and yet we're getting a bottom edge at the bottom edge right there. That's a fresh air buy on gold. Well, that fresh air buy on gold, guys, just made $700, $800. It's a pretty good trade, right? It's a pretty good trade with no interpretation required into that area. You just have to make sure you check your value, check to see that there's a solid reason to be long gold, and then bid for that low price, bid into that low price. Make sense? What about bonds? Did anybody see any fresh air trades on bonds, yes or no? Does anybody see any fresh air trades on bonds, yes or no? Come on, guys, you must be able to see some fresh air trades on bonds. Would you agree this bottom edge here is a fresh air buy trade? Yes? Would you agree that this trade here is a fresh air buy trade? Would you agree that this trade here is a fresh air buy trade? In other words, can we all agree that every single one of those bottom edges is basically a fresh air buy trade, yes or no? Every single one of those bottom edges is a fresh air buy trade. And people wonder why we were buying bonds. Come on, really? Well, not really, is it? It's very obvious that there's a fresh air buy at the bottom edges. There's no fresh air sell because that's a manipulation sell on this, isn't it? On this trade here, that's not a fresh air sell because the orange line's going up and the blue line's going down. That suggests that there's a buyer in the bottom edge absorbing that selling. There's a buyer at the bottom edge absorbing that selling, and that's still bullish. So we obviously can see the difference between an absorption print type idea and a fresh air, just a stop run kind of idea to try and get liquidity. Does that make sense, guys? Pretty much? Pretty much. Yes, it's a fresh air sell at the moment on oil, but obviously it's on a downtick just now, Paul, so it's not perfect, is it? You know, you're getting that fresh air coming into the top edges up here, but obviously you'd have had to have seen that in real time into that fresh air narrative, wouldn't you? But yes, it is a fresh air sell, and it has dropped off quite nicely. It should have dropped off a lot more because there's a lot of selling in here, so it's somebody's buying back into this area here, but you just acknowledge it and just make sure that you don't overstay your welcome. But it's still somewhere in excess of about $300, $400 profit on the sell trade, right? Cash open in 5 minutes, guys. Cash open in 5 minutes time.